This is Democracy Watch. Okay, so Mark, we've got an important and disturbing development in Mississippi. Can you speak on what just happened?
Yeah, so look, the Republican National Committee has filed 6 new lawsuits this year. 5 of them have been in swing states. One of them, though, is in the state of Mississippi. And this lawsuit is very similar to the ones we've talked about before, trying to make it so that ballots that are received after Election Day won't count. But it's really interesting that they filed this case in Mississippi because Republicans control the legislature in Mississippi. And after the RNC filed this case, the Republican legislature tried to repeal the law that they were challenging. And guess what? On the eve of the governor being ready to sign that bill, they withdrew it. They want this lawsuit to go forward for some reason.
So would this lawsuit basically establish some type of a precedent that they can use to exploit throughout the rest of the country?
Exactly. So I'm pretty sure what's going on here. I think if you read the tea leaves, Brian, you are exactly right. Why is it that the Republican Party would spend money on, by the way, using their national lawyers, right? They didn't use lawyers in Mississippi. They used the lawyers that are their top appellate lawyers in the Washington, D.C. area to bring a lawsuit in Mississippi where, let's be honest, not really a battleground state. Yeah. But what Mississippi has going for it is it's in the Fifth Circuit, right? So if you're trying to set a precedent to ban ballots from being counted after Election Day, and you're filing cases in places like Nevada, which is in the Ninth Circuit, and you're filing cases elsewhere, where would you go? Well, you might just well go to Mississippi. And when the Republicans in Mississippi think they're helping you out by repealing the law that you're challenging, you might tell them, let's not repeal that law.
So basically, can you speak on the fact that, let's say this lawsuit is successful in Mississippi, and then it goes up to the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit upholds it, then Democrats have a choice to make because they can appeal it again to the Supreme Court. But if they lose at the Supreme Court, then it becomes a nationwide precedent. And if they don't lose at the Supreme Court, then basically the Fifth Circuit becomes a desert in terms of being able to vote, being able to count ballots after Election Day.
Right, and it also becomes something that you've pointed out in almost every episode we talk about. It becomes precedent, right? Now it's not just, a theory. It's not just like a crazy right-wing idea. It's not even a district court ruling. It's actually a ruling of one of the 11 or 12, counting the D.C. Circuit, courts of appeals that oversee these kinds of cases. And so now you start to say, well, what other circuit courts might adopt a similar ruling, and at some point, by hook or by crook, does the Supreme Court get this case? I don't obviously have insight into the inner workings of the RNC on why they are pressing this case, but it is interesting that they decided to bring this case in Mississippi, and that they don't seem to have wanted the win when the legislature was offering it to them.
Yeah, they don't want the win in one state. They want the win in all of the states encompassed within the Fifth Circuit. And then if Democrats do appeal, then all of the states encompassed within the entire United States. Which I guess raises the question, if you're Democrats, and I know we're getting ahead of our skis here, but if you're Democrats and this is upheld by the Fifth Circuit, then what do you do? Because you want to challenge something so egregiously anti-democratic like this, but at the same time, if you do, you risk establishing a nationwide precedent with a 6-3 conservative court.
Yeah, look, I think that you've put your finger on what it is why it is I think that the RNC, okay, a committee that says that it is 100% merged with the Trump campaign, right? Remember that? It's 100% merged with the Trump campaign. It is just all it's doing is Trump business. That the only lawsuit it is brought outside of the presidential battleground states is this state, is this case.
Can you speak on the dangers of basically circuit courts like the Fifth Circuit basically acting as an extension of the Republican Party to validate these laws that are just so egregiously not only illegal and unconstitutional, but just wholly anti-democratic on their face?
Right, look, I mean, I think that we have seen the same thing play out in so many areas. Look at the abortion decisions. What do you do if you are an abortion provider or an organization that is working for women's reproductive health, and you wind up with this case before a judge, let's just say hypothetically in Texas, and that case, right, goes up to the Fifth Circuit. Like, what do you do? Do you just leave it be, or do you run the risk with the Supreme Court? These are the hard decisions that, unfortunately, a lot of different groups and a lot of parts of society are having to face. It is just a tragedy that this is the reality, but it also shows how dangerous it is when we assume that the only places we have to pay attention to are the swing states. You know, Democracy Docket, I wrote a piece about this Mississippi case for Democracy Docket members, alerting them to this a couple of days ago. And, you know, one of the points I made is that, you know, if you think you only need to pay attention to what is happening in court in, you know, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, you know, and maybe you pay a little bit of attention elsewhere, you'd miss what's going on in Mississippi. But you know, if you're doing that, you may be missing the long game, or the short long game that they are playing out of a place like Mississippi, where, by the way, who's defending the state of Mississippi? The Republican Attorney General of Mississippi, which, you know, like we saw that play out in Louisiana in the redistricting case, right? When the white voters brought a case in Louisiana, who was defending Louisiana? The state of Louisiana, right? The AG of Louisiana. Yeah. So you can see how sometimes you can see how we're seeing this disturbing trend of these cases being brought in places where conservatives and Republicans think they can maybe run national precedent through these cases where they have, you know, Republican AGs and, right, you know, conservative courts.
And this is so important to pay attention to right now because, you know, if this stuff goes through and we're only paying attention to Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, then we're going to wake up one day and be like, where the hell were we when this was happening? So it's important to focus on this stuff now. It's especially important to follow along with this stuff. You mentioned that you've been writing about this in Democracy Docket. For those who are watching right now, if you're not signed up for Democracy Docket and you want to stay on top of this stuff as soon as it happens so that you're not caught, you know, on your heels when it actually does end up in front of the Fifth Circuit or, God forbid, as a national precedent, then please make sure to sign up here. I'll put the link on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Mark, to that point then, can you explain the significance as it relates to the courts of making sure that we have a president in office who is going to appoint judges to these circuit courts whose influence is so outsized right now? Because you basically have, I mean, I mentioned before how these courts, especially courts like the Fifth Circuit, are just an extension of the Republican Party. And so when you allow Republican presidents, for example, to appoint justices to courts like this, it then gives those courts a permission structure to usher through these egregiously anti-democratic laws that may very well become precedent for the rest of the country.
Right, and also, we ought to add, by the way, on pretty fringe theories. I mean, the theory that they have in Mississippi is that because Election Day is, the statute sets Election Day as the Tuesday following first Monday in November, that prohibits these ballots from being counted. I mean, that would have a sweep across the country of a whole bunch of laws, including, by the way, early voting, which doesn't take place on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. But you're absolutely right. You know, the problem that we have is that for a long time, there was a bipartisan consensus that though there would be differences between, obviously, the judges that, you know, the first George Bush appointed or Bill Clinton would appoint, you saw a lot of pretty middle-of-the-road Bush appointees and some pretty conservative Clinton appointees. And really, starting with Trump and, you know, his commitment to appoint off of a list to the U.S. Supreme Court, like literally a pre-printed list, you know, it has become much... The distinction between judges has become starker. Now, look, that doesn't mean that Republicans are always going to win before Trump-appointed judges. We've won cases before Trump-appointed judges, and it doesn't mean that we'll always win before Obama or Biden-appointed judges. But it does mean that, you know, when you see Mitch McConnell say that the only thing he cares about are appointing federal judges, that he turned the Senate into just a judge appointment factory. And you saw what he did with Merrick Garland, blocking Merrick Garland and speeding up Comey Barrett. You know, you see that this affects all manner of our society, including democracy.
Right. You really don't even need Republican majorities when you have, you know, the courts who are basically going to litigate from the bench for these Republicans, and they know that. And the fact that McConnell has made this his top priority for the entirety of his career in government is a testament to just how important all of this is. So again, don't listen to what they say necessarily, but certainly watch what they do. Again, for those watching right now, if you want to stay on top of this issue in particular, as important as it is, please sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.